You got it.
Greek philosopher Aristotle once said that the roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet. As we see today, we have a lack of agricultural literacy in the United States. And while this root is bitter, if we sow the seeds of education, we can guarantee sweet fruit to come in the future and increased agricultural literacy. Ultimately, the United States Department of Education needs to implement and increase agricultural literacy by implementing agricultural education for high schoolers throughout the country. Now, in order to fully define this problem, we'll first re-look at the causes of this problem and the bitterness. Then we'll look at a plan in which we can solve this and sow the seeds of education. And lastly, we will look at the justification for solving this issue and getting sweeter fruit to come. First of all, our agricultural literacy is at an all-time low. And while this is bitter, it's because of a couple reasons. First of all, consumers are disconnected from their agricultural roots. And for this reason, they learn about their food through food scares and hear about misinformation. According to Collins in the 1997 publication of Emerging Infectious Diseases Journal, 50% of American consumers are concerned about their food safety. Now, in order to address these food safety concerns and make consumers' dollar purchase more food for their dollar, we need to increase agricultural literacy. So what's our plan of action for addressing this and re-sowing the seeds? Well, there's two ways in which we can go about this. First, we can look to the United States Department of Education for funding and for policy guidelines. But if this is not possible, we have many private industry-related examples in which we can go off of. And we'll look at both of these individually and how they can play off of one another right now. So ultimately, what would be ideal would be if the United States Department of Education would use existing national funds to implement such policy. This way, our policy and our agricultural education systems would be standardized across the board. However, these funds may not exist, and so we could end up seeing that the Department of Education would create guidelines for our schools to implement them statewide. This may lead to a lack of standardization, though. So, we look to our option 2, private funding and private programs. According to an interview for Troy and Stacey Hadrick of Falcon, South Dakota, cattle ranchers who are members of the Beef Checkoff in South Dakota, published by beefboard.org on July 2nd, 2014. For each dollar that is sent in to the Beef Checkoff, say a cattle rancher sells a cow or a steer or a calf, that money is then reinvested in programs such as the education of more than 5,000 cattlemen with the Beef Checkoff's Masters of Beef Advocacy program. Now, this program is intended to teach producers about their industry as well as how to address consumer concerns. However, we could take this program and implement it and change it to appeal to a more consumer base. Now, our second option for looking to already provided templates would be from a 2015 article by the American Farm Bureau Federation's of Foundation for Agriculture's homepage. Their publication explains agricultural literacy and the lack of it in the United States. However, the American Farm Bureau Foundation for Ag has created program materials for elementary students. Now, the obvious next step, if we were to continue with a program such as this, would be to implement these programs into middle schools and high schools and increase agricultural literacy there as well. Now we've addressed what the problem is and why we need to fix it and how we can fix it. But we haven't justified our actions in that. Fortunately, there's many justifications for creating this sweeter fruit to come. First of all, the United States Department of Education actually has a stake in this as well. They have recently launched new reforms in which they say that they want to create more college and career-ready students than ever before. Now, this is from an unauthored 2015 publication by the Department of Education. They launched vague reforms. Now, if we couple that with the fact that the Risk Management Agency of the United States Department of Ag's job opportunities in 2015 stated that the United States Department of Ag produces 17% of the nation's jobs, we see that agriculture is actually our nation's biggest employer overall. So ultimately, if we look and we provide this agricultural education early on, we will be allowing students to have that advantage for when they go to seek a job. Because most likely, for 17% of the population, their job is going to deal with agriculture in some way. And so having this education prior to entering the workforce will make them more career ready. Furthermore, the question remains on why we need standardization of this program. Well, if we refer back to those reforms from the United States Department of Education's publication, we see that they want standardized curriculum in their reforms in order to make sure that all students in all areas of the United States are equally prepared for the workforce. And lastly, the justification for the private sector's stake in creating sweeter fruit and educating our consumer base. Well, we see examples from the beef checkoff in this justification. In a forum called the Beef Checkoff Questions and Answers of July 2015, beefboard.org showed that from each dollar invested in the beef checkoff, $11.20 is returned on that investment through industry research as well as educational programs. So by increasing the education for our consumers, we're also going to help out our producers, and it's going to be a win-win for both parties. Ultimately, consumers and producers have a stake in our agricultural literacy. And for this reason, the United States Department of Education needs to implement agricultural education, to increase agricultural literacy across the board for the United States. And by doing so, out of the bitterness of the lack of it now, we'll have increased opportunity and sweeter fruit.